On the evolutionary path from tree-climbing primates to the dominant species on the planet, humans domesticated various animals. They helped humans in hunting, warfare, and labor, served as sources of food, and provided raw materials for crafts. But there's another companion in human evolution that might be the most important of all those tamed by humankind. It's not a living creature. It is a true natural force. Today, we will talk about fire, its role in human history, and the complex relationship between humanity and this elemental force. By subscribing to our channel, you'll be the first to know about new videos. We also encourage our viewers to actively like their favorite episodes and leave comments. Your engagement helps promote the channel through the platform's algorithms. Of course, people began using fire long before our species appeared. Both Neanderthals and earlier human species were familiar with it. At early Homo erectus and ergaster sites, fire pits and hearths over 1.5 million years old have been found. We do not know for sure whether they could produce fire themselves or simply preserved flames ignited by lightning. However, we can assert that even back then, our distant ancestors knew how to use fire to warm themselves and scare away predators. But the most significant evolutionary achievement related to taming fire is undoubtedly cooking. Chewing raw meat or tough roots takes a long time, and the nutrients obtained are relatively minimal. Food that has undergone thermal processing is significantly more caloric and is digested much faster. As a result, the size of early human jaws decreased. With the same skull size, a larger brain could now fit, and there were more nutrients available for its development. However, the increase in brain volume presented early humans with a new problem. Gradually, a larger head began to form at the fetal stage, leading to complications during childbirth. As a result, humans became the only species on the planet that needed help from their peers during birth. On the other hand, this made people more social beings, strengthening internal bonds with human communities. Most likely, the first dishes cooked with fire were roasted tubers and roots, caught in natural fires. Most animals could escape from forest and steppe fires, though their charred bodies might still be found and eaten by our ancestors. However, digging up a baked root from the ground was much easier. It's no coincidence that the first tool in human history is considered to be the digging stick. Noticing the new taste and higher nutritional value of plants exposed to fire, ancient humans may have begun placing them deliberately into the hearth. The same approach was soon applied to game obtained during hunting. Many scientists believe that the acquisition of fire could have contributed to the development of human speech. At nightfall, the whole clan would gather around a communal fire. The flames provided warmth and a sense of security. Moreover, they cooked and ate together, which naturally strengthened group bonds and encouraged communication. Look at modern humans. Just like our ancestors, we love to gather for dinner, eat together, and talk with each other. Think of how cozy and pleasant it is to sit around a campfire, a fireplace, or an open hearth. It's likely that ancient humans felt the same way. This ritual has accompanied us throughout the evolutionary journey from early hominids to modern humans. Fire also allowed humans to notice changes in the properties of materials. While meat became softer when exposed to flame, wood hardened. The first spear in human history was a long stick, charred and sharpened at one end. Later, humans began attaching sharp-chipped stones to these sticks. The ability to use, maintain, and control fire became crucial for the survival of all human species. Fire helped both our ancestors and their competitors survive the harsh winters of the Ice Age. It's no coincidence that every culture worldwide has its own legend about acquiring fire. The Aztecs believed that fire was brought by the opossum, Yaushu, who stole it from an old man. In Cherokee legends, fire was obtained by a water spider. In the myths of Australian Aborigines, the first fire was created by a water rat striking sparks with its teeth. Many other cultures, including Slavs, Chinese, Scandinavians, and Brazilian indigenous peoples, attributed the gift of fire to heroes or gods. However, the most famous myth is the ancient Greek legend of Prometheus. This titan stole fire from the forge of Hephaestus and brought it to Earth, defying the supreme god Zeus. As a punishment, Prometheus was condemned to eternal torment. Yet his act of defiance helped humanity survive. Most people know the legend this way, but it also tells that Prometheus brought humans art, literacy, agriculture, and metalworking. The ancient Greeks thus linked fire with many aspects of civilization. In essence, this perception reflects reality. Human civilization would likely not have developed as it did without fire. People used fire for warmth, cooking, and protection from wild animals even 20 or 30,000 years ago. However, around 12,000 years ago, with the retreat of the glaciers, humanity gradually transitioned from foraging to settled livestock farming and agriculture. A significant part of this progress was due to the use of fire. As farming tools were initially primitive, around the 7th to 8th century BCE, a technological revolution occurred. Humans learned to smelt metals using fire. This breakthrough took place in the Middle East, in the region known as the Fertile Crescent. It was an area with high annual rainfall and a warm climate, covering modern-day Turkey, Syria, and Iraq. The first metal actively smelted by humans was copper. Metal objects were much stronger and more durable than those made of stone, bone, or wood. Around the 5th to 6th century BCE, people developed a new alloy that defined an entire era of human history: bronze, an alloy of copper and tin. At that time, no stronger material was known. Bronze was used to make not only household items and tools, but also armor, weapons, and horse harnesses. Thus, fire once again influenced the progress of weaponry and the history of wars. Warriors armed with bronze weapons and armor included the Persian and Spartan soldiers in the Battle of Thermopylae, participants in the Trojan War, and the phalanxes of Alexander the Great, who conquered half the world. Even the famous Iceman Otzi, whom we discussed in a previous episode, was equipped with a bronze axe. For a European of that time, such a seemingly modest weapon by modern standards symbolized status and wealth. Along the routes of metal transportation, new trade paths, cities, and states began to emerge. Nations controlling mines grew wealthy and prosperous. It's also worth noting that even then, humanity began to widely use precious metals. Gold and silver, while not as strong as bronze, were easier to melt, had an attractive shine, and did not corrode. These properties made gold and silver universal means of payment and materials for jewelry, roles they still play today. In the late 2nd millennium BCE, bronze was replaced by various types of steel. These iron-based alloys were not smelted but forged, with charcoal instead of wood burning in forge furnaces. Steel tools, weapons, and armor set the development vector for nearly all peoples for centuries. After the invention of industrial steelmaking in the mid-19th century, steel became the primary material used by humanity. This is also true for coal usage. Initially, charcoal and later coal became the primary fuel for thousands of years. Today, coal consumption remains high, but humanity could not have used coal or other fuels without fire. Coal proved capable of generating much more heat than wood. Eventually, coal was used not only to heat homes and power forges, but also to fuel steam boilers. Burning coal became the energy source that powered the pistons and steam engines for trains and ships. Thanks to fire, people could travel much faster. Later, engines of new vehicles began burning liquid or gaseous fuel, allowing humanity to conquer the skies and even leave the planet. However, fire has always been a double-edged sword for humanity. While it helped build civilizations, it also remained a destructive force, often beyond human control. Early humans often benefited from natural wildfires, but they too fell victim to the fiery element. For a long time, wood was the primary building material. People built houses, auxiliary structures, and even entire cities from it. In densely populated medieval cities like London, Paris, or Moscow, there was little planning, and organized fire services were virtually non-existent. As a result, these wooden cities often burned down almost entirely. One of the most striking examples of such a catastrophe is the Great Fire of London on September 2, 1666. This event was well documented, allowing us to reconstruct it in detail from the very beginning. The first building to catch fire was the bakery of Thomas Fariner. Bakers began their workday before dawn, using candles to light the rooms. It's believed that one of the candles fell on the floor, causing the fire. The buildings in that part of the city were tightly packed together. The Fariner family managed to escape to the neighboring house through a second-story window. Unfortunately, their maid failed to escape and became the first victim of the fire. Local residents began saving their belongings and attempting to extinguish the flames on their own. However, the dense construction and dry summer made these efforts nearly futile. When the Lord Mayor of London arrived at the scene, he hesitated to order the destruction of buildings in the fire's path. By the time the royal guards, led by the king's brother, arrived, it was already too late. Fire tornadoes began to spread throughout the city. The blaze gradually died down only by September 5th. In total, the fire destroyed more than 13,500 buildings, including 87 churches. Even some large stone structures were not spared, and St. Paul's Cathedral was completely ruined. After the ashes cooled, London had to be practically rebuilt. This time, the city had the opportunity to properly plan street layouts. Additionally, state fire services began operating in London from that point onward. These innovations laid the foundation for modern urban planning and construction. Thanks to the destructive force of fire, later cities were built with greater foresight and organization. Another destructive power of fire was harnessed by humans to annihilate one another. In the 7th century, the Chinese invented a special mixture that released vast amounts of energy during combustion: gunpowder. Before this, fire and flammable mixtures were actively used in warfare. Flaming arrows and boiling pitch were common, and in Norse and ancient Germanic sagas, there are many stories of enemies being burned alive in their own homes. However, the black powder from China once again changed the history of warfare on our planet. Initially, gunpowder was used to make firecrackers and festive rockets, believed to drive away evil spirits with their noise and sparks. But one day, rockets were attached to spears and arrows and aimed at invaders attacking a Chinese province. Later, Genghis Khan's armies conquered China and eagerly adopted the deadly invention. It's believed that during their conquests in Asia and the Middle East, the Mongols actively used gunpowder artillery. Gunpowder reached Europe around the 9th century, and mass use of firearms began in the early 14th century. Since then, firearms have only evolved and improved. Throughout history, people have repeatedly used initially peaceful inventions for killing and destruction. This was the case with gunpowder, and the same happened with another innovation: combustion engines. By the early 20th century, internal combustion engines had been invented. The automotive industry was rapidly developing, and aircraft powered by liquid fuel had been created. Yet, from the earliest times, humans had dreamed of reaching the stars. One of the dreamers who aimed to reach the stars was the American inventor Robert Goddard. In 1926, he launched the world's first liquid-fueled rocket. It was small and rose only 12 meters, but Goddard continued experimenting. By 1942, he and his students had built and launched 35 rocket models, each getting closer to his ultimate success. Goddard became the pioneer of modern rocket engineering. However, while some dreamed of reaching the stars, others were eager to use rockets for destruction. Goddard's research inspired the development of the V-2 rockets in Nazi Germany. Fortunately, by the end of World War II, this deadly weapon had not been fully exploited. Later, both victorious countries actively used these developments. The United States did not hesitate to bring German developers to America, giving them the opportunity to continue their work. As a result, the Soviet Union was the first to realize Robert Goddard's dream of spaceflight. However, the American rocket program also achieved success. Today, liquid-fueled rockets, spewing jets of fire, carry satellites, research robots, and even humans into space. Yet, fire remains unconquered and untamed to this day. This dangerous element continues to kill and destroy. It still ignites gunpowder in bullets and shells, powers the engines of ballistic missiles and tanks. For humanity, fire has become both a guarantee of survival and progress, and a means of self-destruction. It's time to reflect on how we should use fire in the present. With it, we can explore new worlds and develop new technologies, or we can destroy our own home and everything built by previous generations. At the end of our episode, as usual, we thank those who watched it to the end. If you want to learn more about the emergence and development of our species and other living beings, we recommend checking out other videos on the Age of Dinosaurs channel. They cover the world of living nature, from the origin of life to the present day.